We all kind of get a break again today. We're not going to do anything with the software today. Y'all just get to sit and listen. You don't have to do any hard work. I do have a little thing at the end that's going to be it maybe it'll be fun or maybe you'll think that it's stupid, but I just sort of enjoy doing it, so I hope y'all like it too. But anyway, one thing you can do until when we start up while you're waiting for us to start is if you don't have Capture, the app Capture on your phone, if you wouldn't mind seeing if you can download that. You may have to log in as your e-rater, but that's probably all you'd have to do because I'm thinking it's a free app. It was to begin with. Who knows? Everybody wants to make a buck these days. All right. Adobe Capture, yes. It has a big CA on it. I don't know if it's capital or not. It's just a little square, very simple, just like everything else that Adobe does. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started so that we can get out in that cold quicker. Today, we're going to be talking about color theory. And I wore my special shirt that has a rainbow on it because I love Pink Floyd, and this is one of their famous album covers, in case you don't know. But anyway, color is a really simple thing. Well, or maybe I'm going to have trouble like I did on Tuesday. Color is a really simple thing, and it's also a very complex thing. Some people, that is their job, is figuring out color and keeping color consistent at places like big printer companies, like the one that we're going to go visit later in April, actually. So first of all, I want to tell you about color and how it affects you. You should be inspired by the nature around you. Like if you're doing a logo for a company that's agriculture, you might automatically think green, but why are you using green? You need to think about these things and be inspired by the things that are around you. So, color is simple because apples are red, grass is green, and sky's blue, and so on and so on. But what shade of red? What shade of green? What shade of blue? When you're working with branding with companies, you can't just say, okay, IBM, I'm just going to slap on this light blue because it's what I had on my palette. They have specific colors. So you have to really think more about color than just saying, okay, the logo is going to be blue. You need to specify. So before we get too deep into this part of it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about color. We've all seen color wheels. We've seen color wheels our whole life. If you've taken any art classes, you for sure have run across this before. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take it apart and tell you why they are named like they are, because there are specific reasons. The first most basic colors are the three colors of the primary color group. And the reason they call them primary is because with other colors, if you mix yellow and blue, you get green and all that kind of stuff, but you can't mix any colors to get these colors. So they're kind of like the basic building block, the foundation of all the colors that we have. So that's why they call them primary. You hear about the primary colors and this and that, but that's why they are the primary colors, because they start everything. Okay, the next set of colors is called secondary. And the reason they're secondary is you take the blue and you take the yellow and the red and you put them together and you've got orange and so on. So you mix the primary colors to get the secondary colors. So that's why they're secondary. They're on the second level. They're one level up. And then you have the next set, and I always struggle pronouncing this, tertiary. I have it phonetically here. I listen to it on the web so that I can pronounce it. It's tertiary, which really means third. So they could have called it the third colors, but they chose to call it tertiary, which is hard for me to say. What you're doing is you're taking the primary colors, the secondary colors, and mixing them to get this third level. So we've got three different levels of color on the color wheel. So put them all together and you've got this. Complementary colors, like this slide shows, are the opposite colors on the spectrum. So if you put red and green together, like, like Christmas, those colors kind of vibrate next to each other. They are complementary because they are opposites. And so they're really a big contrast. So, and you might have noticed this on some things, like if you have red text on a green, you're going to see it's going to do sort of a weird thing with your eyes. You're going to have some sort of it's an optical illusion. Okay, so next to complementary colors is harmonious colors. So harmonious are colors that are next to each other in the color wheel. Now it could be any of the colors that are next to each other. I just chose that as an example. So those will go together because they basically have the same DNA. They're all made with basically the same colors. It's just the amounts of the color that they have. So they go together pretty well. Okay, then we go into the warm colors. Those are the colors that make you think of summer, make you think of warmth. And so those are considered the warm colors. And of course, the opposite of that are the cool colors, the ones that are more wintry and they make you feel a little chilly when you see them. And so it's a psychology that people use whenever they're choosing colors for like a room. This is a really neutral color. So that's why they chose this. They didn't want the walls to be a bright red and take away from any of the learning that you might be doing. So we choose our colors according to the use. So with that, let's talk a little bit about color psychology. Now this you could take as far as you wanted. I'm sure there are dissertations written all over the place in the art industry talking about color psychology, what color makes you feel, what it makes you want to do. And so I looked up this. This is just one of 1,000 I could have picked, but there's really no clear-cut answer for the colors and what they make you feel like. So let's look at this really quick. They've got all the colors here. They've got from gray all the way up to a really kind of golden yellow. And they have decided that all of those colors have certain main psychologies that go along with them. So let's look at optimism. Okay, you see all of these industries that have that color primarily in their logo. So they're saying that they're optimistic and they have clarity and they're warm. Well, they are warm colors, but let's look over at the next slide for a second. And you notice yellow and orange mean caution. So it's not always the same meaning. We have to take it into account, the use of what we're doing. Any caution sign is going to be yellow or an orange. And so is it really optimistic? That could be optimism and warning are kind of opposite. But, like I said, there's no clear-cut guide as to what the colors are. You have to know your use. And so let's take peaceful, this green color right here. Here, and a lot of people think of it as growth and health and money and all of that kind of stuff, prosperity. But then on this other slide that we looked at a second ago, we have green meaning poison, danger. So there, you see they have opposite meanings even in our culture. So these are just some that I pulled up. I don't know where red flag warning came from. That's kind of a relatively new thing to me because the wind is always blown in West Texas. And there was never a red flag warning until the last few years. But still, red means warning in this situation. But red might mean something entirely different in a different situation. Not only is it different in our culture for different meanings in our culture, there's also color differences in other cultures. Like, for instance, let's take red and black because, that's our colors. We wear them all the time. So here it means love and danger and action, kind of opposite stuff sometimes. Far East, it means good fortune. In the Middle East, it's also danger and caution. And in India, it means beauty and wealth and power. So you can see that if your audience is not all from the same culture that you're in, you have to be really careful when you use color because it might mean the exact opposite of what you want it to mean. So you can just look at these. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but you can see that colors in different cultures have sometimes the opposite meaning. So the word of caution here is to know your audience. When you start doing campaigns, like in your campaign class that's coming up this next semester, and when you get your first job and you're doing campaigns, know your audience. If you're targeting an audience of Americans that are basically the same culture, the same level and everything that you are, then you're probably going to be pretty safe because you know what colors to use. But if you have an overseas audience, you need to do your research to make sure you're not doing something that's going to just turn the entire audience off. Okay, so let's get down to the basics of color in Adobe. And sorry, I am just a little bit dry-mouthed. Okay, so the color in Adobe Creative Cloud. How do we use it in Adobe? So far, we really haven't touched on any of that. We were just using color to differentiate in Illustrator from the stroke from the fill. And in Photoshop, we were just trying to get a pleasing, realistic color. So we really haven't touched on color very much. So let's just kind of talk about color in the Creative Cloud. So there's there's actually three, and I have, for some reason, it's not showing all of them. There we go. I don't know why that one was down there. Anyway, there are three main color modes that we use in Adobe. And when I say mode, it's actually, you change a lot of things when you change the mode. For instance, if you change the mode from RGB to CMYK, you can see a difference. You can see a color shift on your screen. So we have to know what mode we need to work in for what particular end use. So we've got RGB, CMYK, Pantone, and Hex. So let's just go through each one of those separately. Okay, first of all, RGB. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. And they are separate channels in it's kind of gets to be math and stuff like that. So it's basically, so you have three channels in RGB. You have your red channel, you have your blue channel, and you have your green channel. Okay, so the way that RGB is expressed on our computers so that we can, because we see these numbers. So the numbers 0 is white. I'm sorry, black. I always get that backwards. So 0 is black and 255 is white. Okay. So if you were in a room that's totally lit, that would be considered RGB 255. If you're in a room that's black, the lights have been turned off and there's no light, that's 0. So all the light is 255, no light is 0. So that's how RGB works. And whenever you're working with RGB, each of these channels have their own color. So 0, 0, 0 is black. 255 is white. Okay. So what does that mean for us? Well, RGB is the color that's on your computer screens. The RGB is the color that are on your smartwatches, on your iPhone, on your iPad. All of the things that are lit up, any monitor is RGB. And it's because the color is created with light, and the color of light is RGB. Does that make sense? Am I getting off of the track here? Okay. So it's an additive color and it's light based. And additive means the more numbers, the more color you add, the whiter it gets. And so, like if you were to take a rainbow, here's my shirt. If you have pure white, just sunlight, and it goes through a prism, it breaks the colors apart so you can see them. So that's the colors of RGB. And like if you see a rainbow, the little droplets of water are taking that plain white light from the sun and it's making it into the spectrum. That's why we can see that color whenever there's a rainstorm. So, any questions about RGB? Pretty simply, pretty simple. Okay, and with RGB, we use RGB on our screens a lot. And like most specifically, I think that I told you to leave it on an RGB mode in Photoshop because there are things that don't work in Photoshop unless you're in RGB. If you change it to CMYK, then there are some things that are going to be grayed out that you're going to want to be able to access. So in Photoshop, we work in RGB. All right, CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. They're the pigments, they're the colors of pigments of paint, because whenever CMYK is used, that's for printers who are taking real honest to goodness pigment and putting it on their presses and then running it. So it's a subtractive color. We'll get into that in a second. Okay, I want to tell you why it's CMYK instead of CMYB. A lot of people think that back when they were making all these names of different things, that they decided to make this K instead of B because it would get you confused with RGB. Well, that is totally false. That is not the reason that it was called that. Because CMYK, the color spectrum of CMYK, existed before anybody thought about RGB, before screens. So the reason that they called this bottom color black K is because you get plates whenever you are running something on a press. Each color, the CMYK, they all get different plates, and they run that color singularly through the press. So K was always the plate that had all of the information, like how many pieces of this do you need to run? What kind of paper? Who's the customer? What's the due date? All of those things were on the outer edges of that plate. So they called it the key plate because it had all the key information. So that's why it's called K instead of B. Anyway, you won't be tested over this, just a little history. Okay. So I got that in the wrong order. Okay, well, maybe I didn't. So the way that, we're thinking about light and rainbows and things like that for RGB. For CMYK, think of paint. Back when you were in school, you mixed paints together with your fingers and you basically would end up with this big muddy mess. So that's why it's called a subtractive color, because you have to subtract the colors in order to get a white. With RGB, you add the colors, you add the light to make white. So it's an opposite thing. So that's why CMYK is used for printing, because it's adding colors and making sure you've got the right amount to make it the right color. Okay. So, and this also, I'm trying to explain this enough. So this also shows whenever you have RGB, it makes white in the middle. When you have CMYK all added together, the overlap makes black. And so here are those plates I was talking about. Each plate has its own separate color on it, so that whenever you put it all together, it makes a 4-color picture. So if you've ever heard of 4-color or 4-color process or full color, they call them all kinds of different things. But this is how we make things look like they're realistic in a printed way. Okay, So we do need to understand the difference between additive and subtractive, because if you put too many colors together when you're doing a print job, it's not going to look as good as it looked on the screen. Okay, the next color is Pantone. How many of you have heard of Pantone color matching system? You have? Have you also are you doing strictly things online? Okay, well, Pantone is one of those things that back in 1963, well, let's say before 1963, when it was invented, you would have to take like a swatch to the printer and say, you must match this color. So it was really hard to go from printer to printer and have a consistent color. So Pantone in 1963 came up with this idea of making a consistent color palette and putting numbers to it, so that if you say, I want PMS 485, then every printer you go to, every vendor knows what color you're talking about. Excuse me. So it's not like that printer has, and there's thousands of colors, by the way, there's thousands of Pantone colors. And it's not like every print shop in the whole world has those thousands of colors in a can sitting on the shelf. That isn't the case. Basically, Pantone matching is a recipe book. It has all of these different colors. It may have thousands and thousands of colors, but there's this base kit that they can mix together to make each color. It's sort of like if you were to go to Lowe's, the hardware store, and get one of those paint chips, and you give them the paint chip, it has a formula on the back. So they know how to mix that color, and they get really close. So it's the same way with Pantone matching. And so it's consistency, and you have a number that you can use. Instead of having to carry a paint swatch with you, you can just tell them the number and they'll be able to do it. Okay, here's the book that most printers have. It's a bigger book now. This is several years old. It's the only one I had. And you can see how many colors there are. And there's all kinds of little recipe things underneath the swatch. So you can go in and pick the color that you want. And it's consistent. The reason that this is important for you guys is because when you're branding a company or a business or yourself or whatever, picking a Pantone number means that it will be consistent. If it's on a shirt, on a cup, on a billboard, on an ad on TV, it'll be a consistent color, because branding relies on being branded with color. Like if I say the color brown, what do y'all think of logo wise? UPS. UPS has taken a real plain, earthy color that really is not very exciting, to be honest, and branded it so that when you see brown, that particular PMS of brown, you think UPS. Even if it's not UPS, you still think UPS. Okay. So when do we use Pantone? Well, you can use it for shirts and all those kinds of things, but here are the ones I came up with. If you're using Pantone, you might want to print something. Let's say that you wanted to print a little brochure about Texas Tech, but you don't have very much money. So you can't do it in the 4 colors, because the more colors you put on something, the more expensive it's going to be, because they have to run it through the press more. They have to use different inks. It's a whole thing. So you're going to print in 2 colors. Well, if you print in black and you don't use a PMS color, you just say, okay, I want this red, then they will separate it so that they have the right amount of magenta, the right amount of yellow, maybe even just a little bit of cyan in there to make it exactly the right shade. So instead of just having a 2-color printing job, you're ending up with a 4-color printing job, which you couldn't afford to begin with. So using Pantone allows the printer to have just 2 plates. So that's why Pantone is important in that case. We also use it a lot as print designers because of that. You also want to use it for logos and for shirts and things like that. It may get broken down at some point into CMYK, but you have to have that PMS color to keep things consistent for your branding. Okay, I was mentioning PMS 485, and the reason I was doing that is because that is Texas Tech's Pantone color for red. You know, they have just a PMS black, and they have PMS 485, and they have some secondary colors as well. But first and foremost, Texas Tech Double T has to be printed with that color in mind. And so it's not, whenever you use the Pantone 485, it's not divided between the CMYK or the RGB. It's that color consistently, whether we print it here or if somebody in Washington, D.C. prints it, they're all going to be the same color. Okay. And there I'm repeating that. Also, it's used in silk screening. How many of y'all have ever had a business or a organization that had shirts printed? Yeah, I'm sure that all of you wear shirts that have been, I mean, this one was printed that way. So we've all had some dealings with Pantone, and we didn't even realize it. Now, I do want to say one thing before I go to the next color mode. Adobe and Pantone have for the longest time had a partnership so that the Pantone color library was loaded onto every Adobe software. For some reason, about a couple of years ago, I don't know why, I'm just guessing that there was a contract dispute or something like that. Maybe Adobe wasn't willing to pay enough, or maybe Pantone was wanting too much. I don't know. It's irrelevant. But Pantone no longer is put automatically into the software. If you want to use a PMS color, if you want to use the library to pick out your color, you have to pay extra and download, what do you call that? It's one of those extra things you put into your software that doesn't come with it. So you have to buy an extra thing. And I'm not going to even suggest that you guys do that. I just want you to be aware of the system. Now, like me as a print designer, if I were to design something for Texas Tech and I don't have the PMS color in my color library, I will just make it a spot color and call it 485. And it will virtually be the same thing for the printer. It just may not be exactly right on the screen, but still it will accomplish the same thing. Any questions about Pantone? Nope. Okay. So I'm going to go to the final mode that we have that we're going to talk about today, and it's hex. How many of you have taken web design or have designed a website? Nobody? Oh, you have? Okay, good. We've got one. Now, I am not a web designer. I have used hex codes in some instances, but it is not my thing. I'm just going to tell you that right up front. But basically, it's just another way to express a color. And now these numbers are the hex colors. They always start out with a pound sign, and then it has 6 numbers in alphabetical things in there. So it's totally different looking than RGB, but there are some similarities that you can pick up on. Like, for instance, this is white. So here we have the 255. And over here, they express it as 6 Fs for whatever reason. Somebody just flipped a coin and decided, I think. But where you use those hex codes are if you're writing code, if you are. Where I used them was using a mail system to send out emails. And there's code behind it, behind the visuals. And if you don't like the color, if the color is not being consistent that you've got in your email, you can go into the code and change the colors in certain places in the code. So if you ever hear hex colors, this is what that is. And if you see a weird color designation that's got something like that, you'll know that that's a hex code, that that's a web safe color. And I think the reason that they use these colors, my understanding, is that they want to use the most simple colors too on the web pages so that they don't load slowly. Like if we used the thousands and thousands of Pantone colors, it might cause the page to load slowly. So that's just their way of shorthanding the color. So anyway, now you know. All right. So one thing I want you to take away from this that we didn't really talk about is when you're choosing colors for a brand, don't just choose the color because you like it. Let's say you're really absolutely deeply in love with purple. That doesn't mean that you need to use purple on every single logo that you design or every branding system that you come up with. The primary color does not need to be purple. So think about, you need to do the research and think about your audience, about the company, and what color best represents them, not just your favorite color. All right, now we're going to work with capture. So take out your phones and let me see, I don't have it pulled up. Were all of you able to download it? Okay, so we talked a little bit about it the other day. Um, you basically get a screen. Well, I think I've got, well, actually, I just wanted you to download it right now. Oh, I do have some stuff here. Let's look at this. Okay, so you basically get a screen that looks something like this. And to start something, you hit create. So hit create. And now you've got all of these choices: audio, graphics, shapes. Um, I need to use a clicker. Then you've got color, you've got type, you've got patterns, materials. Like if you're doing something 3D and you want to make it look like it's stone or wood or something like that, you can make your own materials in this. And then you can make brushes that I don't use them very much, but brushes, like if you want it to be something really strange, you can do some brushes there. And then also looks. You can create profiles for your things. But what we're going to focus on today is colors. So keep that one at the top of your mind, and we will get into our lab exercise. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a hands-on experience for CMYK. And there's only 6 of us, so I think I can handle this without having to get any helpers. But if somebody wants to help, they certainly can. Yes, we are going to do that. We are going to mix some paint. Let's see, I'm counting right? Yeah, 6. That's half the class. Now, these colors are not true to the actual RGB. They are slightly off because I just used what was in my little paint box. But they're not too far off. Oh, goodness. Do any of y'all do painting? You paint? So this will be right down your alley. Uh-oh. Practically everything I own has paint on it one way or another. Ick. Some of these get kind of weird looking. Oops. I'm giving a lot of this yellow. Y'all are going to be swimming in yellow. All right. Y'all might want to roll up your sleeves. I don't want to have any cleaning bills. Here you go. And I do have some wet ones I'll pass out. Okay, so what I want y'all to do is I want y'all to mix the colors and see how many colors you can make. And then we will use capture. Mhm. And we'll pick palettes out of that. All right. Here's a wet one for you. You must like red. Me too. My favorite color. Here's a wet one for you. Alrighty, and I have more if you get a little messy, because heaven knows I'm a messy, messy person when it comes to paint. A nice texture there. I'm really a color nerd. I even watch those videos where they're adding like some sort of acrylic paint together on and coming up with different shades. Got a little UPS going on in there, don't you?
Yeah.
What kind of painting do you do?
Acrylic.
Do you like do landscape, abstract,
Just
whatever you feel like?
yeah.
That's the best way to paint, honestly. If y'all need more color, let me know. You've got some pretty good colors going on your wet wipe. It's mixing there too. Like yours, you've got a whole palette there. Huh?
Just getting mostly like
See, that's the trouble with CMYK. If you're not really careful, you can get a gray really fast and it goes muddy quicker than you think. Oh, I need to take roll. Okay. Nope, nope, nope. There we go. While y'all are finishing up, I'm going to take roll because you're going to get effort points today. And we want to make sure that that all of you are counted. Okay. Ryan. Okay. Sari. I'm sorry, your name isn't Sari. Sarah. That I throws me off. Sarah, you're here. Okay. Daniel. Charlie. Trevor. Caroline. Matt. Nope. Tessa. Lindsay. Emma. And Bailey. And Hunter. All right, I'm going to put a star there to know that y'all made an extra effort through the terrible colds of West Texas. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go back to your Capture app. Let me get to that again, Capture app. And then with the color, where it says colors and it has all those those colors stripes there, just hit create. And then it's going to open up something that sort of looks like a camera. The only difference is it has these little color balls that are moving around, shifting around. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to your palette, not your palette, your paint palette there, and set one that you like pretty well, and then you hit that button just like you're taking a photograph. Okay. So there you go. And you can also use your photographs that are in your camera. You have to give it permission and all, but you can use that. Okay, does anybody else need some more wipes? No? Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to pick 3 separate palettes. That means those colors at the top are going to be different each time. And so you can do one of your paint that you've been playing with. Then you can do one of the room. You can do one of whatever you want. You can take you can use one of the photographs in your camera roll and do another palette. But I want to see 3 different palettes.